Hello again and welcome back to our course on Project 2019. In this section, we're going to start to look at the very important topic of calendars. Now, generally speaking, I tend to cover calendars usually earlier on in courses on Microsoft Project, but an understanding of calendars and how to use them, I think benefits from knowing quite a bit already about how scheduling works, how resource assignments work, and so on. So on this occasion, I've left them till a little bit later on in the course, and hopefully this will give you a better ability to understand just how important calendars are. Having said that, when you're using Microsoft Project, making sure that your calendar or calendars are set up is actually one of the things that you should do very early on in the work on a project. And you'll see this as I explain the use of calendars from now on. And one of the things that you may want to do after going through at least part of this section is to take a look at the calendars for the wedding project and for the bathroom refit. But we're going to start a completely new project, so a blank project for now. And we're going to use a very different calendar for this particular project. Now, the project is going to be a project to do some work on a road in a town. So there's some resurfacing work to do. We've got to drill up the road, we've got to prepare it for surfacing, and then we've got to surface the road, and then we've got to put everything back together again. Now, as a building job, and one which should be done as quickly as possible so as to keep the disruption to residents as short as possible, we're going to be operating from relatively early in the morning until relatively late in the evening. So this particular project is definitely not an office hours project. So I've created a new project and I've called it Road Fix 01. And on the Project tab, I'm going to click on Change Working Time. And this brings up a dialog, the Change Working Time dialog, that explains the current working time, or if you like, the current calendar for this project. Now, the settings you see here are the default ones in Project 2019. Now, let me explain this dialog because there's quite a lot in it. In the middle, you basically have a month-by-month calendar, and you can use the little arrows at the top to step through those months or scroll down, whichever you prefer. And on any particular month, the grey background means it's a non-working day. So that would make sense. Saturday and Sunday columns are currently in grey. And whatever you have in black there is the current day's date. So today is in fact March the 19th, 2019. Working days show with a white background, so Monday to Friday, as you would expect, are showing in white. So if I select a day, so the 19th, the working times for that particular day that I've selected are shown just here on the right. So you can see it says working times for March 19th, 2019, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. to 5. So I'm assuming that we're allowing an hour in there for lunch. So that's essentially an 8-hour working day, and the figures here are based on the default work week on the calendar standard. And you can see the calendar we've got selected in the top there, standard project calendar. Now also over on the left on the legend, you can have exception days, and I'll talk about those a bit later on. You can also have non-default work week, so you can set up a particular week as being, say, different from working hours to other weeks. And at the bottom, you have a couple of tabs. On one tab, you can indicate any exceptions. So exceptions might include things like public holidays. And you can also define what a work week is in this calendar. Now, we're currently looking at a calendar called the Standard Calendar. And for this project, this is the project calendar. Now, you do actually have 3 calendars by default, and if I click the drop down up there, you can see the other 2. So we have a calendar for 24 hours and a calendar for night shift alongside our standard project calendar. So if I wanted a 24-hour calendar for this project, I could select it, and you can see that that involves working 7 days a week. And it would be fairly straightforward to set that up as a calendar for this project. If I wanted a night shift calendar, I could do the same. And the working hours here are 12 a.m. to 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. So those are your 3 default calendars. Now we come to a very important point. Let's suppose that generally speaking, your projects do run during office hours. So the standard calendar is the one that's closest to your hours of work. And let's suppose that 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. is fine for you in terms of working hours. If that's all true, then clearly you can use this standard calendar as your basic project calendar for many or all of your projects. If, on the other hand, the standard calendar is never right for you and you say work from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then 2 until 6, or maybe you do a 7-hour working day or something like that, you may want to change the standard calendar to fit in with your own standard hours of work. But if that's not the case, if in fact on each of your projects the hours of work tend to be different, then I strongly suggest that you don't change either the standard, the 24-hour or the night shift calendars. You just leave them as they are. And that for each project you create a new calendar or some new calendars to deal with that specific project. So what we're going to do on this occasion is we're going to create a new calendar for Road Fix project because the hours of work are going to be much longer than the standard, and also because it's a rather unusual project from the point of view of hours of work. So I'm going to choose the option up here on the right, Create New Calendar. Now when I create a new base calendar, I can give it a name of my choosing, and I'm going to call this My Building Calendar. And I can either create it as a new base calendar, which means I can just enter everything from scratch, or I can make a copy of an existing one. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of the standard calendar because although I'm going to change the hours quite a bit, some of the features of the standard calendar are fine, so such as the fact that we're not going to be working on weekends. So I'm going to click on OK. And you can see at the top now I'm working in My Building Calendar. So the first thing that I need to do is to change the standard work week. And you see there we have a tab called Work Weeks. And if I click on the Details button, it will give me the details of what the standard working week is. So notice the radio button here, use project default times for these days, set days to non-working time, and set days to these specific working times. So you can see my 3 radio buttons there. So the first one, use project default times for these days. So I can select individual days of the week, and you can see that the figures for Monday, 8 a.m. to 12 and then 1 to 5. If I click on Sunday, there's nothing in there because it's a non-working day. I can also select this option where I go in and set days to non-working time, and also I can set days to these specific working times. So a few different options for me in there. Now what I'm going to do on this occasion is I'm going to change the working hours for all of the working days. So Monday to Friday, and I just held down my Shift key in order to highlight all of those. And each of these days currently has the default working time from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then again from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And I'm going to change these working times. So I'm going to select a different radio button. I'm going to select the bottom one, set days to these specific working times. And you can see they now become active and editable fields. So I'm going to set them to the longer working times of 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then down here we're going to have 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. So that's a 12-hour working day. So having done that, if I click on OK, and you can now see that my working times have changed, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that's changed for all of those days, those weekdays. So if I click on the 18th, you can see that's the same. If I was to click on the 17th, that's telling me it's a non-working day. So the standard working week now on this calendar is 5 days of 12 hours. Now in a moment I'm going to look at some exceptions, but before I do I've got another very important point to point out. And that is, if I click on options down here at the bottom, it takes me into project options to the schedule page. And there is a section that we looked at briefly earlier on in the course called calendar options for this project, and it's the first one just here. Now, one of the things in Project 2019 that you need to be wary of is that although we're now setting up quite an unusual calendar, and this calendar is going to be used in our project together with some other specific variations that we're going to look at in the next section, setting up the calendar alone is not enough to make sure that all of our calculations in Project 2019 for this project are going to work correctly, because there is a set of options in project, the ones that we're looking at now, which are used for a number of calculations. And it's very important that you have those options set to tie in with the project calendar. So for instance, one of them here, hours per day, is set at 8. And if we leave that set at 8, we're going to find some inconsistencies in the calculations that project does. Now, it's important to recognize that although we've got a project calendar set up as a standard 12-hour day, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody working on the project will be working on the basis of a 12-hour day. And what we need to tell Microsoft Project is, when doing your calculations in reports, in scheduling and so on, what number of hours per day should be the standard number that you base your calculations on. And we need to increase that from 8 up to 12, because we're doing 12-hour days. Now note that this is only for the project RoadFix01. This is not going to affect the hours per day for any other project. So I need to be clear that the hours per day on this project, the standard hours, is 12. And therefore the standard hours per week would be 60. So I'm going to increase that up to 60. Now I'll leave the days per month as 20, but I'll also change the default start time. So if any tasks where we don't specify a start time, the default start time is going to be 7 a.m. And I'll also change the default end time. And again, if we don't specify an end time for a task, it defaults to 8 p.m. I'll leave the starting day for the week as Sunday and the fiscal year starting in January. Now, it's very important that those are set to the values that you want to apply throughout the project, even though, as I say, individual tasks, and we'll see individual resources, may not all correspond to those figures. And click on OK. Now, having set up our standard working week in the building calendar, let's now look at exceptions. It's very important not only that you get the working week set up and the working hours set up correctly, that you also schedule in any relevant exceptions before you start planning a project. Now, an exception that I want to set up here is Easter Monday. This project is going to run either side of the Easter holiday this year. So I'm going to go to March, which I'm already on. That's a bit of luck. And Easter Monday is on March the 25th. So I'm going to give it a name. So Easter Monday. And the start time and finish time are both March the 25th. And I also need to make sure that that's indicated as a non-working day. So if I click on details, you can see that it's already selected non-working at the top there. And also it's worth noting that if this was half a day, so if we only wanted half a non-working day, we could select the working times option and put in the times to and from in there. But I'm happy to keep that as it is and click on OK. Now, by default, when you set up an exception, it's actually set up as a recurring exception. But in doing that, what Project 2019 does is to set it up to recur once. So you have here a recurrence of daily, and if we jump back into details again, you can see their recurrence pattern daily, and it starts on Monday, March the 25th, and it ends after one occurrence. So you only get Easter Monday once. If, on the other hand, I wanted to set up Christmas, so let me go to December and click on the 25th, and let's set that up as well. So in here, I'm going to put Christmas Day. And we're going to click on Details. And again, it's a non-working day, which is fine. But I could say that I want it to recur yearly on December the 25th. But I could say that I want it to occur more times than just once. So let's do this for quite a way into the future. So I'm going to say after 10 occurrences. So it's going to recur every year and it will end in 2028. So what I'd normally do at this point is set up any other exceptions that I have. And when I've finished with my exceptions, I can click on OK. And now let me go into the project information option and change my calendar from standard to my building calendar and click on OK. So I'm now using that new building calendar as part of my project. That's it for this section. Please join me in the next one.